You open your eyes and the sky is wrong. Not the color is fine. It is the same pale blue it always is at dawn, but there are no contrails. No distant hum of an engine at 35,000 feet. No faint glow from a phone screen catching the corner of your vision. The silence lands on you like physical weight, and before your brain has time to name what is missing, your nose tells you something your eyes cannot process yet. Smoke, raw earth, and something else. Something that makes the hair on your forearms stand before you consciously register the smell as blood. You are somewhere in what will eventually be called East Africa. The year is approximately 98,000 BCE, and you have roughly 4 minutes before the leopard on the ridge behind you decides you are not a threat but a meal. This is what anthropologists call the Middle Stone Age. Your species, Homo sapiens, has existed for about 300,000 years, but the version of human life you are about to experience looks almost nothing like the one your textbooks describe. Researcher Curtis Marion at Arizona State University spent years excavating Pinnacle Point, a coastal cave system in South Africa, and what he found rewrote the standard timeline. By 164,000 years ago, people at that site were harvesting shellfish, using pigment for symbolic behavior, and producing heat-treated stone tools of a precision that took modern engineers weeks to replicate. You are not waking up into a world of confused brutes. You are waking up into a world of people who have already been solving hard problems for 200,000 years. The leopard moves, you freeze. Your heart rate jumps to around 170 beats per minute within 2 seconds, because your amygdala, a small almond-shaped cluster of neurons in your temporal lobe, does not distinguish between a photograph of a predator and the actual animal. That response, cataloged extensively by neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux at NYU beginning in the 1980s, fires identically in you right now as it would have in any of your ancestors standing on this same soil. The wiring has not changed. What has changed is that in your original timeline, the amygdala almost never gets to do its actual job. You back away slowly. The leopard watches. It does not follow because you smell like a group and groups are expensive to attack. The group is maybe 30 meters away, still asleep under a granite overhang. And that social cluster is the reason you will survive the next hour. 30 people. That is roughly the number your brain was built to track. British anthropologist Robin Dunbar proposed in 1992 that the human neocortex evolved primarily to manage social complexity, and that the upper limit of stable personal relationships the brain can maintain sits at around 150, with a tighter inner circle of roughly 5 to 15. In the camp under the overhang, you probably know every single person by name, by smell, by the specific way they breathe when they are sick. You know who is reliable in a chase and who panics. You know whose knowledge of route locations can be trusted in a dry season and whose cannot. Your entire survival infrastructure is human. There is no backup system. Breakfast does not exist as a concept. You eat when there is food, and you do not eat when there is none. And the body you are living in is calibrated for exactly that rhythm. A 2017 study published in Cell Metabolism by Sachidananda Panda at the Salk Institute found that modern humans eating within a restricted 10-hour window showed metabolic improvements that mirror the baseline metabolic profile of populations with no access to constant food. Your ancestors were not practicing intermittent fasting. They were just living in the conditions your body was designed around. The women in the group leave first, moving southeast toward a marshy area they have been visiting for 2 weeks. They carry digging tools, shallow baskets woven from sedge grass, and 2 infants strapped to their backs with strips of hide. The knowledge they carry is generational, where the water table sits close to the surface in a dry year, which plants signal the presence of underground tubers, which berries are safe in their green state, and which are only safe after the first cold night. None of this is written down. All of it lives in human memory, passed through direct teaching, and the loss of a single experienced woman in this group represents a catastrophic knowledge loss that could take a decade to partially rebuild. What does your body feel like? Probably terrible by your original standards. Your feet have been bare or wrapped in minimal hide since birth, and the soles are calloused to the density of shoe leather. A 2010 study by Daniel Lieberman at Harvard comparing barefoot runners with habitual shoe wearers found that shoe wearers consistently strike the ground with greater impact force, suggesting that footwear, over generations, restructures the entire kinetic chain of the leg. Your legs do not ache after long walks because the connective tissue in your feet, ankles, and calves has been conditioned since you took your first steps. You have walked an average of somewhere between 9 and 14 kilometers every day since you were 4 years old. Your cardiovascular system reflects it. The men and older adolescents move in a different direction, tracking the edge of a dry riverbed where the previous afternoon they noticed impala prints in the mud. The oldest hunter in the group, a man of perhaps 38 years, is also the most respected person alive. Life expectancy at birth in this period was brutally low, perhaps 30 to 35 years, but that number is dragged down by catastrophic child mortality. If you survived to adulthood, survival into your 50s was possible, and the people who made it that long carried information that was worth more than any material object in the group's possession. The tracking process you are watching would floor a trained wildlife biologist. The oldest hunter reads the impala prints the way a cardiologist reads an EKG. Depth variation between the front and rear prints tells him the animal's speed. The distance between sets of prints confirms it. A slight deviation in the stride pattern on the left side indicates a healed injury to the animal's left foreleg that will cost it energy over a long chase. He saw that same pattern in a different animal 6 years ago. He has been building this database since he was 9 years old, observing with adults who had been building theirs since the 1950s BCE. Archaeologist Will Roebuck at Leiden University has argued that systematic use of color pigments, particularly ochre, by early Homo sapiens points to a capacity for abstract symbolic thought far earlier than the cave paintings of Europe, which date to around 40,000 years ago. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, ochre was being engraved with geometric patterns by 75,000 BCE. The people around you may be drawing on stone right now for reasons that have nothing to do with art and everything to do with identity, memory, or communication. The distinction matters less than the capacity. They are people who use symbols to encode meaning outside their own skulls. Midday. You find water at the marsh. You drink from it directly, and your stomach will likely spend the next 48 hours reminding you that your gut microbiome from 2024 is not calibrated for the bacterial load in a surface water source in Pleistocene Africa. The people around you drink without apparent concern because their immune systems have been calibrated against exactly these pathogens since infancy. Your body and theirs run the same hardware. The software has diverged dramatically. The afternoon is spent doing something that will later be called nothing by historians because it leaves no archaeological trace. People talk. A woman retells an account of a river crossing from 3 seasons ago in enough detail that 2 adolescents who were not present absorb it as usable navigational memory. An older man demonstrates the correct angle for pressure flaking a stone tool to a boy who keeps getting it wrong, and he does this by holding the boy's hands over his own and making the motion together, a teaching method described by educational psychologist Myrtle McGraw in the 1940s as proprioceptive learning, learning through physical co-experience of movement. The fire is kept alive not because anyone is cold, but because fire is so expensive to restart that no competent group ever lets it go out if they can help it. At dusk, you eat a portion of impala, cooked over the fire, along with tubers that have been baked in coals until the starches break down into a more digestible form. The cooking process was likely underway in Homo erectus populations as far back as 1 million years ago. And anthropologist Richard Wrangham at Harvard has made the case that cooking was not a cultural development layered onto an existing human body, but a biological driver that reshaped the human digestive tract, shrinking the gut, redirecting energy to the brain, and fundamentally altering the trajectory of the species. The fire you are sitting beside is not a technology. It is closer to an organ. The sky after sunset holds roughly 5,000 visible stars. Your visual cortex, which allocated significant processing real estate to screen brightness and color contrast in your original life, adjusts slowly. By full dark, you can see well enough to identify faces at 15 meters. No phone, no electric light. The circadian rhythm disruption that affects roughly 50 million Americans chronically, documented extensively by sleep researcher Matthew Walker at UC Berkeley, does not exist here. Darkness means sleep. Your body knows it immediately. You lie down on a bed of dried grass covered with hide, and you listen to the sounds of 98,000 BCE, a hyena somewhere to the north, wind moving through dry grass, breathing, the fire settling, a child making small sounds in sleep. And then something happens that has been happening every night since before your species had a name for night. Someone begins to hum, low and rhythmic, and someone else picks it up. And for a few minutes in the dark under a sky still 4 millennia away from the first pyramid, a group of 30 people does what human beings do when they feel safe enough to stop watching. They make sound together, for no reason except that they can. You wake up the next morning in your own bed. The ceiling is white, the phone is charging on the nightstand. The silence is the same pale quiet it always is at dawn, except that now you can hear, faintly, in the direction you cannot quite name, an engine at 35,000 feet. And something in your amygdala, that same ancient almond of neurons that fired when the leopard watched you from the ridge, registers it as familiar. Not safe, familiar. There is a difference. And somewhere below your conscious thought, your body has always known it.